through the ysforward.com site as well. That goes directly to the community advisory team via Dr. Holden. So just want to remind you to make your voice heard in that way as well. A brief look at tonight's agenda. We'll talk about a few of the process steps that have got us here. Dr. Holden would like to share an update about Mills Lawn. We'll talk about what we really learned and what the community advisory team took away from our second forum. We'll give a brief look at some of the progress that our educational visioning team is making, or just a reminder, that's the group of students, teachers, staff members, parents, and community leaders. We'll give a financial overview and start to assign some true dollar amounts and some costs to some of the options that we've been discussing throughout this process. And we'll really talk about those additional facility options. You may remember those are called locally funded initiatives through the first couple rounds of forums, and the community advisory team has some thoughts in refining that list and want to gather feedback from you. Ultimately, this process is taking place to make sure that the facility master plan for the future of Yellow Springs schools and their school buildings is educationally fantastic, it is financially appropriate, and it is community supported. So those are really the three goals that these community groups have been working with these goals in mind. We're reaching a really critical point in the master planning timeline. We are really kind of in this third bullet point at the bottom, Jeff, if you'll highlight that, really in the concept testing and assigning real world costs and real millage impacts and potential millage and income tax impacts to the plans that we've been discussing throughout. A community survey will follow as we work toward a board recommendation from the community advisory team in the month of April. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Holden to share an update on Mills Lawn. Thank you.
Thanks, Shay. My update on Mills Lawn is not really an update. It's a repeat of what I've said before. And so that is, you know, folks, we are not developers, nor are we in the business of being developers. And we also believe in all of the positive benefits of green space. So as you hear information tonight, you're going to hear information about renovations and then some combination of a new build or new build reno at the Enon Road site. So if the ultimate decision is renovations at both campuses, I think that leaves us kind of where we are right now with facilities. And so there's no intention of increasing the footprint, except in that renovation of both building plan, there is a replacement of the modulars. So if there's any increase in footprint, it would be slightly around where the modulars are replaced. If the path forward is a new build, then we go from there. But I just want you to hear the same thing I've been saying all along, and that's kind of where we are with Mills Lawn. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Holden. Thanks for being with us, everyone. My name is Jeff Parker. I'm with SHP, the firm that's assisting the district to develop a master plan. And we are looking forward to this evening. As Shay mentioned, there are a few groups involved of the community advisory team, as well as the educational visioning team. And I just wanted to give you a bit of a preview on the work that educational visioning team has done to this point. They have met actually 7 times, and we've worked through a lot of prompts and come up with a lot of solutions and a lot of ideas about teaching and learning at Yellow Springs. But we wanted to give you a glimpse into what's going on there. And we asked the question early, does your building get in the way? Does it prevent teaching and learning the way you want it to happen? And just to share some of their responses, the buildings as they are configured today, the comments was that they were kind of uncomfortable, both physically and environmentally. So from a heating and cooling perspective, there wasn't much room for students and teachers to collaborate in these buildings. There's no place that accommodates exhibition nights. Spaces and disciplines are siloed and separated, which really limits the amount of interaction that can occur between them. And it's just hard to connect with each other in the buildings. It's hard to get outside to do learning outside. obviously electrical and data deficiencies in older buildings. No good place for presentations or performances. So they really struggle with that. And a big part of project-based learning, which the district is focusing on, is the aspect of presentation, really sharing your work and explaining what's going on. Spaces can be noisy. There was a lot of conversation about the shoebox and the challenges that creates at the middle school. Safety concerns in the labs due to congestion. And finally, there's really no good way to kind of show off the students' work for an extended period. You just can't curate the work for very long. So those are some of the frustrations. We've heard from this group and from the community advisory team. They're curious to know what the benefits and what the perhaps challenges might be of grade level interactions. And so we wanted to kind of share some of that with you. And they kind of broke down into 3 categories: benefits, concerns, and responses. How do we react to those concerns? So the benefits, again, we're in 3 categories. Academic, the idea of presenting and critiquing across grade levels was seen as a really positive opportunity. Seeing the progression of my learning. So students, say in the 3rd grade, seeing what's happening in the 5th grade and being able to look forward to that. Flexibility and moving up or down grade levels. If there's a gifted or a challenged student, they have opportunities to tailor their learning a little better. Collaborating across grade levels. There was a lot of conversation about the fact that projects really can only last the duration of a school year. But when everyone's together, it could not only span a school year, but span grade levels. Continuity of instruction, just everyone being together and on the same page was seen as a real benefit. Expanded student leadership opportunities, student-to-student tutoring, and the positive impacts go both ways. You might be inclined to think that that the younger students would benefit from the older students, but the group was quick to point out that the benefits go both ways in this regard. Cultural benefits, having everyone together in the same place is valuable for creating a familiar kind of culture and tone in the building. It fosters mentorship. The students were quick to point out the buddy groups between the ages and the benefits that those bring. They highlighted a few experiences: cheer camp, the Spidey program, and Scrooge the musical, I believe, as being some of the great times they had that span grade levels. And projects spanning grade bands teach responsibility and empathy. And we know we're coming to understand the importance of social emotional competencies. Finally, with regard to just the resources, maybe a more pragmatic view, but it offers a broader and richer shared academic experience. 1 kitchen instead of 2 kitchens is easier and more affordable to operate. Auditorium and performance space could be shared, and expanded media and library offerings. So a lot of benefits here in different ways. Some of the concerns, I think the students came up with this. They called it the reckless high school behaviors. So you've got student drivers on campus, you've got language, you've got the prospect of high school students and elementary students being on the buses together. How do we structure outdoor spaces to make sure that everyone is in the right place? And they pointed out, though, that the concerns tend to be fear-based. So we talked a little bit about how to respond to these. There's some pretty easy passive things we can do, and then some active things we can do. 2 wings or 2 floors to organize the elementary and the middle school, high school students would be a really good way to keep everyone in their place, but allow appropriate levels of interaction. Staggered arrival times and busing, so we can avoid having all of the students descending on campus at one time. We can organize the bus routes so that the middle school and high school may go first, and then the elementary students come second in the second tier. And also, if we can more intentionally foster a familial culture on the campus, that really helps to just kind of set the tone for what's expected there. All right. We also asked, when you consider having the prospect of having a kindergarten through 12th grade in the same facility, do you feel it is bad or good for the district? And when we say district, we mean students, teachers, and all of Yellow Springs combined. And they responded this way. Out of, let's see, what is that? 25? Out of 25 responses, they were all neutral or better. But the group was quick to point out that this says one thing, but it doesn't say another thing, and I'm going to explain that. What this means is that if the community thinks that a K-12 campus, a K-12 facility is the right answer, the educational visioning team believes that it would work well. They do not. They wanted to be clear and say that they aren't really endorsing one plan versus the other because they don't have the depth of insight that the other teams do. So I wanted to be sure that I represented that appropriately and didn't kind of misconstrue what this is trying to tell us. So that, again, this only says from an instructional standpoint, the benefits of being together really outweigh the negatives, okay? All right, so we had a community forum a couple of weeks ago and touched on much of what you're going to see tonight, but we're actually going to kind of drill in and increase the resolution of the picture tonight. So, but we did want to give you a bit of a review of what happened in the first setting. We had about 80 people responding to the polling questions. You can see there the breakdown of the group, who it was composed of. I will say there were several district administrators that did not participate in the polling but were present. So the numbers are, the actual attendance numbers are a little bit higher here. So that's the makeup of the group. We talked about several options: the renovate all option, the renovate only the high priority option, a new K-12 facility option, and the demo reno add K-12 facility option. Okay, and we're going to dig into the more detail on those momentarily. So, Mr. Thackeray, do you want to talk a little bit about the program of educational spaces?
Absolutely. Actually, do we want to address any chat things as we go now?
It's a great idea.
I'll bring up a couple here. One from Amy, Dr. Holden, maybe this is best for you. What pedagogical model in K-12 has the school considered, and what case studies have been explored?
Well, what we've considered is what we've been doing since about the past, I don't know, easily 8 or 9 years, and that's project-based learning. So that's what we considered. It was my discussion with staff when I first came on last year prior to us stepping back into virtual. But we had many discussions about it, and I think there's a commitment to project-based learning. I'm a proponent of project-based learning done well, and I think it engages kids in a deeper way in academic content.
I'll just add to that. With the educational visioning team had a conversation in our very first session is about that and the project-based learning at the district, and it was the support was resounding in that group for this. And, when done right, when done well, that it's positive for the kids. Lots of positive outcomes.
We have another question, just Jeff, from your educational visioning update. Terry Smith says a frequent statement from SHP is that there is just no way for students to share out their work under current conditions. Are classroom walls, hallway walls inadequate for displaying student work? And what about sharing work or collaborating with technology, such as Padlet, Flipgrid, and in general classrooms joining international projects? I'd just like to, maybe before I, just like to reiterate that is not necessarily SHP's thoughts on this. This is just sharing back the results of the educational visioning process. Excuse me. Is there anything that members of the educational visioning process would like to clarify from that question? Or Dr. Holden, you've obviously been leading this process as well, so.
Well, I'll just say, yes, there's not enough space, and yes, we already use all of those technology tools to share work and get broader collaboration. But if you've been to the buildings on exhibition night, there's just not enough space, and that's simply one example. But these buildings, the concept we have now of displaying student work is quite different from what might have existed when the buildings were built, and it just wasn't designed that way. So, there's not enough space. And I know there are some EVT folks on here and some students here tonight. They might.
I'd like to, Dr. Holden, maybe nudge. I think Josephine had a response as well. Josephine, if you want to respond, and go ahead and unmute yourself, feel free.
Yeah, I can just say that the walls, like the teachers decorate the walls already. So even what is up is a lot of it teacher stuff, and the windows also take up a lot of space, and even displaying student work on the walls. Like it's not very aesthetically pleasing. It's not space for like sculptures and stuff like that. I don't know these backgrounds, sculpture and ceramics and any other kind of project like that. And no one checks Flipgrid. No one will check those platforms. It just won't. It's not a great way to showcase student work, because after I submit a Flipgrid, I never look at it again. So I don't think anyone would really check that.
Thank you, Josephine. I'll ask Matthew, I see your question there about the bond market. We have a deeper dive into the finances of this here shortly. So I'll save your question about the current bond market for a little bit later. And I'll say, Chris, your piece isn't really about educational visioning, so I'll save the rest of the questions I have, and we'll continue to move forward and bring those up at the right time. Thanks. Go ahead, Jeff.
All right. I'll give a brief overview of the preliminary program of space requirements. Okay. So we met with several district representatives, principals from both schools, and drafted an initial program that identifies for the middle school, high school, 12 general classrooms and 3 science classrooms. At grades K through 6, so what's Mills Lawn, is 14 classrooms plus 2 kindergarten. So every grade level gets 2 classrooms, and there are 2 additional classrooms as flex rooms as different size classes go through. There's 1 self-contained middle school, high school special needs classroom, 3 special needs resource rooms that are dividable into 6 teaching spaces suitable for 12 kids each. We think preliminarily satisfies the need for breakout and intervention. 3 art rooms, 3 music rooms, 1 gym that can seat basically the whole student body and staff, weight room, locker rooms, a large cafeteria with stage, engineering design space, and a media center. So those are the basic functional educational spaces that were identified and fit within the square footage that the state would co-fund. Okay.
Todd, would just like to ask a question. If you could go back a slide from Melissa. Media center, cafeteria, and gym would be shared by high school and middle school and elementary in the K-12 model, correct?
It could be. They can also be broken apart and provided in smaller spaces if you wanted to have simultaneous seatings in two separate spaces.
Got it.
Same way with the media center. It could be split or it could be distributed. There are lots of options there.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Todd, why don't you go ahead and lead us into the financial overview?
Why don't we, let's just clarify a note there from Amy. Would K6 and 712 eat together?
I would say they wouldn't have to.
Right.
If it was important to the district that they did, it certainly could, but there's no reason that they would have to. So they could either have separate dining spaces, and the educational visioning team has kind of looked into or studied scenarios where, you know, those cafeteria spaces would also be used to support learning directly as collaborative spaces. So they'd be more closely integrated into the learning area, so that it wouldn't be a space that you would go to and be kind of sit dormant or underutilized for the rest of the day. So it could be tuned to suit whatever's best for the students and teachers of the district.
And we have examples of all those, from single to two to distributed, like Jeff just described. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and move into the financial piece.
Okay. And actually, I'll address the bond. Actually, Kent may be on here, or Becky.
Becky is on here. She's joining on behalf of both on both of them. So yeah, Rebecca Princehorn is on as well. That would be able to answer some in-depth questions alongside Tammy.
Becky, Tammy, if you all would like to speak to the current bond rates, which I understand are variable, but where they are currently.
I can do that. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Interest rates have bounced around a little bit since the first of the year, but they remain very low. And in the assumptions that RBC prepared for tonight's meeting, they assumed a 4% interest rate for a 37-year bond issue. For a new build, 37 years is the norm. And 4% allows a bit of movement up and down, but is overall is a slightly conservative rate, but still certainly in the ballpark.
What is the lowest interest rate you have seen actually sold, Becky?
Well, we had a financing that priced on Tuesday, but it was a little bit odd in that it was only a short piece of a larger bond issue. And that 5-year piece was pushed out. It began in 2036 and went through 2042. And that was right around 2 3/4.
Wow.
But it was small.
Yeah.
So to come back to the original question, the current bond market rates are low, and now would be a appropriate time and an ideal time to borrow money as a public entity. Is that fair to say, Ms. Princehorn?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Just a quick overview of the tax options that you have for funding the program. And the next slide will show you a table that shows you different combinations of financing a mixture of income tax and bond issue. So the first option is a 1/4% income tax and 8.32 mils property, 0.5% income, 6.73, 3/4% income and 5.13, and 1% income and 3.54. And all of these are calculated to deliver financing for a $35 million project. Okay. All right. Property tax for the same 35 million would be 9.91 mils, $347 a year for $100,000 home value. If you're over 65 or disabled with an income under 30,000, that would drop to $260 per year. And to receive the OFCC 26% reimbursement for the approved project, you would have to have the equivalent of a $0.5 mil continuing permanent improvement levy in place. Okay, so that's another component if you do it as property tax only. Okay, next slide.
I think you covered it, Todd. Thank you.
Go back one slide, would you?
Yes.
Go back to one before that then maybe. Got it, okay. I was out of sequence there. All right, I think we've covered everything. Well, no, let me go through this. This is for the combination tax. Okay.
Sorry.
So in the combination where you do a mixture of income tax and property tax for a 35 million, it just gives the scenario up the top. The second bullet point there is that the equivalent of a $0.5 mil permanent improvement levy for maintaining a project co-funded by the state is calculated to be funded out of that income tax. So there is no separate need for a $0.5 mil permanent improvement levy. Mm-hmm. That could be a little confusing. I think I presented those backwards. So thank you.
All right. Shay, any questions from the chat that we're seeing relative to that so far?
No, not specific to the finances.
Okay, all right.
I'll continue to log everyone's questions and we'll cover everything by the end.
Okay, great.
And for full disclosure, the income tax would not be for 37 years. It would only be for 30 years.
Okay, great.
And Becky can answer questions related to that about the durations that are allowable under Ohio Revised Code.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Let's go back. I saw one question in the chat about 37 years. Actually, if the entire project was just for what we'll call bricks and sticks, it could be 40 years. But for most new builds, there are lower life assets that make up the overall project, such as furniture and equipment. And so we do a weighted average for most new builds, that comes out to be about 37 years. When you consider the useful life of a school building in Ohio, you know that many school buildings are in service for much longer than that period of time. On a related note, I want to make sure everybody understands that as before, if you choose to do a combined borrowing, if you will, it's one ballot question. It's a bond issue with an income tax as one ballot question. So you would be approving both of those with one vote. And then as Todd indicated, we would need to set aside a portion of the income tax revenue to meet the OFCC maintenance funding requirement. And that is a requirement to get the state share. Another person, I think somewhere in the chain, had a question about, when will the state money come in? That we don't know. And right now, the state is debating how many more districts to contact in terms of the next group to be served. There are a half dozen districts that are going to be served with controlling board action in May of this year, and likely going to be more. But it's difficult at this point in time to say that the state money will come in at any particular point. What we can do is provide an opportunity in the structuring of the bonds, if the community supports it, to provide for an early repayment. And that is something that we have discussed. That structuring has been discussed as something that would definitely be important to do here.
Thank you, Becky. And for those of you that don't know Becky, she's an attorney with Bricker Neckler in Columbus with a specialization in public finance. Is that fair, Becky?
Sure, that's good.
So if you have any hard questions, tonight is the night to ask them.
Well, and Todd, I don't want to prolong this, but I'm seeing some more questions in the chat. In my experience, and I've been doing this almost 40 years, when we have downturns in the economy, one of the things that happens is the state puts money into K-12 construction. I've seen it happen a number of times in my career. To say that it's going to be tomorrow would be wrong, but I do believe there will be more money put into the OFCC's funds to serve more districts. And the newspapers may be reporting different figures, but it's really, I think, going to be largely dependent on how soon Ohio's economy rebounds. Another question in the chat is state budget cuts and so forth. I think that is somewhat related. When people are looking for work, public works is the answer. It was the answer in the Great Depression. It was the answer in the Great Recession, and it likely will be the answer now. So I think, unfortunately, while we can't predict exactly when that might occur, I do believe it's going to happen, and probably sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Does that get at most of the relevant chats?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right.
There's a number that Dr. Holden has been sharing throughout the process. And I see a couple of people citing different news sources and different pieces, but an estimate of 7 to 10 years is appropriately conservative at this time. Is that fair to say, Dr. Holden? To just reiterate what you've kind of been saying through the process, a 7 to 10 year window is an appropriate amount of time.
Yes, that is from my conversations with the OFCC.
Right. And if Becky's crystal ball is correct, it would be sooner rather than later, but that's all for legislatures to decide in the future. So, okay. Let's go on to the next section.
I did see a question in the chat about the program of requirements or the program of spaces, Todd, and whether or not that aligned with what the district has today. The answer is yes.
Jeff, the question from Amy was, what's the delta between current schools and the list presented in terms of number of classrooms and exhibition spaces?
Correct. Yeah. So Todd, I think your point was that you worked with the building administrators to make sure that this list of spaces equals what they have to date, correct?
Right. The intent was to make sure that your current educational programs have space to carry forward as a foundational investigation.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. Thank you. Just wanted to touch on that while it was still fresh. So at this point, we're going to drill into what the master plan options are to date. And you'll see that the list is kind of growing. There's the renovate group, and that would be to renovate both of the existing campuses, Mills Lawn and Enon Road. There are 3 levels that we have kind of broken out to do that too. The high and medium priority, the high priority only, and what we call the minimum or the warm, cool, safe and dry standard, and we'll get into those. I will point out though that none of these solutions include renovation of the learning spaces to support the district's educational vision. So we have talked before about the facilities task force and the work that they did. They were convened in 2019, 2020 as a community member-led group. They did a lot of work to help identify maintenance priorities for the district, and much of what we're going to share with you is based upon their efforts. So the first one is to renovate. And we're going to dig into those. These are the categories that were identified, along with the values associated with each category. These are the high priority items. Just give you a moment to review that. Some of the big hitters are roof replacement, heating and cooling in classrooms. So really no surprises there about the magnitude of those numbers. This is the medium priority list of needs at Mills Lawn. I will point out that the storm shelter or severe weather shelter is on the medium priority list, just to be clear with everyone. Similarly, for the middle school, high school campus, that same list was developed, again, with pricing. Some of the larger hitters here, the $2 million for replacement of the shoebox on that campus, $1.4 million for the roof, heating and cooling at about $2.5 million. So a lot of work to be done there. And again, this is the medium list, the medium priority needs for the middle school, high school campus. And once again, the storm shelter is on that medium priority list. So when we add up all those numbers to do both the high priority and the medium priority lists at both campuses, it comes to a total of $32 million, 32.9 million. If we, Todd had shared with you the option of doing a combined income tax with property tax, and that is still on the table. But in an effort to present these numbers apples to apples, these are only based upon property tax millage. Okay, so there is no income tax involved in these scenarios.
No.
So you can see there property tax of 9.32 mils, and we've articulated the cost per $100,000 in home value. So $326 a year.
I just wanted to answer a quick question. Chris asked, where did the cost estimates here come from? Mm-hmm. These were the facilities task force made the recommendations, and their last presentation basically said that there were more refined costs needed. And our architecture and engineering team went through and verified and updated those costs to current standards. Todd, Jeff, anything that you would add to that?
I'll throw out that these costs were based on OFCC assessment costs if they were being applied to the buildings today. Mm-hmm. And what I did not do in these costs was parse them out into a partial something. Mm-hmm. For lack of clear definition of what that was, I put the whole cost in there for replacing the plumbing system in the building. Okay. Mm-hmm. When we get to a subsequent option here, I did some parsing, some guessing.
Right. Exactly. All right. So that is the medium and high priority lists combined. Okay. Oh. Here we go. So this is if we were to only do the high priority items, okay? You can see there we're deferring all the medium priority lists, and that breaks down to $22.3 million. Again, no state share here. This is all funded by the district. And this solution was presented at our previous community forum as well. $221 a year per 100,000 of home valuation. So we dug into, what would happen if we just did the essentials, or the minimum. And when we think of minimum, we think of warm, cool, safe, and dry. So we need the kids to be warm in the winter and cool in the spring and late summers. We need them to be dry, and we need to make security improvements to keep them safe. So you can see all the red numbers that are on these columns are items that Todd has parsed or kind of reduced scope on to minimize the cost impact. So this is a segment of that list. This is McKinney and Yellow Springs High School. And this is what those total. So again, those two lists they did not include anything from the medium to low priority list that the facility task force put together. Can you confirm that for me, Todd?
Yes, it does not. And it does not include a lot of the high priorities either. Mm-hmm. So taking an example, plumbing. My strategy here was to get the major plumbing lines replaced above ceilings so that you can be done above the ceiling and have that area stable rather than in need of, anticipating breaking sections of your supply piping, every year for the life of your building. Get that out of the way, get the roof on, get the HVAC up there, and get the electrical upgraded to support the HVAC, but it also doesn't get your electrical sent out to the classrooms, distributed so that you have adequate power everywhere. It doesn't replace the plumbing inside the walls that was put in there in 1952 behind the toilets, those kinds of things. So it's addressing the most major catastrophic failure type issues. But that was my strategy.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I'd like to just add, there are a couple of questions coming up really about last forum's presentation, about some of the details of these plans. What you're looking at right now is the update from the previous forum. So some of the questions that have been asked recently are not going to be answered today, but the answers are within the second forum. Okay, so there are a couple of questions that go back to that, and a lot of these answers are there. I do want to touch on something here. So what you're seeing right now is the update, Ms. Magnus. And Dr. Holden, I want to stop here because the American Recovery Act has come up a couple of times. Do you want to talk about what the scale of those funds look like for Yellow Springs? Just to kind of get that out there for everyone to understand.
So I'm not sure if by American Recovery Act, you are referring to the funds that schools get, which are called ESSER funds, which is the elementary and secondary, etc.
School economic recovery. Yeah.
Thank you. We got ESSER 1, which was about $67,000. We got ESSER 2, which was $247,000. Yes, I am well aware that it says we can use that to address HVAC. That's not going to address much. And so additionally, out of that money, just so everyone knows, every initiative that comes from the state, their response is, please use your ESSER money. So that would be our required extended learning program for the summer. That would be any hotspots that were not covered by the broadband grant, any additional technology, any additional staffing, and any safety supplies, equipment, or measures that we needed to take. So that's
And
our.
just as a quick note too, those ESSER funds are distributed based on student headcount. So the larger amount of some, I know some of you may have been reading kind of in the news about that, but the bulk of those costs or the bulk of that stimulus money is going to the larger, more suburban districts who have more students. So it is dispersed on a headcount basis. So just want to make that clear there.
I wish it was an endless pot, but it's not.
My understanding is there's also like a free and reduced lunch component to that.
Correct.
Yeah. So unfortunately,
in essence,
yeah.
Quick answer is that there's not enough funds to tackle some of the larger needs in the district using those funds.
Correct.
All right, so let's see. My windows keep covering each other up. I apologize. So the work at McKinney and Yellow Springs High School is $7.4 million. And when we look at those two combined, you can see that where we totaled about $12.1 million. So that again is kind of just doing the bare minimum: warm, cool, safe, and dry. And here you see the numbers: 3.45 mils and $121 per year for a $100,000 home valuation. Okay. So again, that's the kind of third tier of the renovation solution.
So this component you did not see at forum number 2. This was added in response to some of the questions.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Todd. All right. The next option is a new K-12 facility. It would be on the Enon Road campus. There's an existing stadium and track there. There is room for future baseball, softball, and tennis facilities if desired. It would be designed to support the educational vision of the district, and it would be designed with a storm shelter built in. All right. The upfront cost of that is $35 million. The state share, which equates to 26%, is $9.1 million, and that's the value that would be reimbursed to the district in that 7 to 10 year time frame. And that makes the local share a total of $25.9 million. Based on property tax alone, that's $347 a year per $100,000 home. The last option was what we call the demo reno add option. And this would be, again, on the Enon Road campus. It would be designed to support the educational vision of the district, and it would be designed with a storm shelter in place. We wanted to take a moment and kind of dig into this a little more just to begin to illustrate with a little more clarity what the intentions would be. This is the campus plan, or at least the plan of the building as it sits today. These areas are the areas that would be demolished. So the music room out on the front corner there would be demolished. The 3-story classroom wing would be demolished, and the what is affectionately referred to as the shoebox would go away as well. Okay, and those would be replaced with new construction that would likely sit in this vicinity. This is not indicative of what the final solution will be. This is really just an effort to say, yes, we can add the required square footage here. There's enough room to do it on this campus. So that's kind of the 30,000 foot view of what's occurring at the Enon Road parcel within this solution. Okay, so again, demo, reno, add for a K-12 facility. The upfront local cost is $33 million. Again, the state's 26% reimbursed to the district, and that leaves the district with a local cost of $24.5 million, $327 a year per $100,000 home valuation. Okay. So, Shay, I think before we go into the polling aspect of this, I'd like to maybe see if there's anything in the chat, any questions about any of these options, so that we clear up as much as we can before we ask folks what they think.
Yeah, there's a question here from Naomi, and I think it's in response to some of the questions or some of the renovation plans about the ability to keep some of the schools through renovation. Naomi said, how long do you expect the bare minimum work to last before we have to look into renovating or rebuilding again? With a couple of those options, especially the new one that you brought up tonight, the $12 million of work, what would the expectation be for when the district would need to go back and do this again if they were to do one of the smaller options that did not address all the needs the task force identified?
If you went with a base option, you're not addressing finishes, paint, presentation walls, marker boards, technology, asbestos containing, materials in the building, except where you actually touch. So it's partly a question of what you are willing to live with in your educational environment for your students. You never have to paint. There's no law that says you have to paint this classroom, but that becomes a community discussion.
Sure. A question from Janet Miller. Is the Enon Road the only option for a new build K-12? The answer is yes. And we talked in the last forum, and the community advisory team considered a number of options. And based on the number of acres needed and the amenities that are already at the Enon Road site, that is the option right now for a new K-12. Dr. Holden, anything to add to that?
No.
I'm trying to bounce back and forth between some of these here.
I will add, Shay, as we're, as you're looking, we've heard a lot of conversation about the Antioch, is any land available at Antioch, and the district. There was some conversation, as I understand, and there were about 10 acres offered as a possible option. And 10 acres is just a little bit larger than Mills Lawn, just as a frame of reference. So it's really not it's not appropriate for a K-12 solution from a size standpoint. The Enon Road campus is about 35 acres currently, so it has a lot more real estate to get things done there.
And if I remember right from the community advisory team, there was an affinity for the Enon Road space. And I think we talked about this in the last forum because the district would not need to purchase any land. Likely another option, the district would have to expend funds to buy the land. And they really deemed that with the amenities that were there, the space available, there wasn't a need to purchase new land. There's a question in here about, let me pull that up. And I think it's in regards to kind of questioning the costs of the, where'd it go? The questioning the cost of renovation. With how many large projects does SHP have experience renovating older structures? And among those, were any of them school projects? I'm gonna bring up a number that I don't know if Todd, you'll like this, but Todd's been with SHP working specifically on Ohio K-12 schools for 30 years. And at the most recent estimate, he has renovated 8.7 million square feet of school buildings in the state of Ohio. And overall, he's designed 24 million square feet of new spaces. So there's a lot of experience there. And I would vouch for Todd because I think he probably won't brag on himself, but in the Ohio K-12 space, there's very little that Todd Thackeray has not seen. And these costs are reliable with everything that we have from our in-house engineering team, our construction background, and our extensive experience in Ohio K-12 schools that are exactly in the same place that you are as a district.
I will share that a good example is Berry Intermediate School in Lebanon. That was fully renovated to OFCC standards. A variance was granted because it was above 2/3 based upon its historical and its value to the community. They renovated that building and it cost nearly the cost of a new building, but it's a beautiful renovation, so it can be done.
There's a good question from Mr. Buckley that says, do cost estimates for the new K-12 include furnishings and equipment? And then a follow-up question maybe for the district that I'll follow up. Simply stated, yes, the new K-12 does include furnishings and equipment. And there's a follow-up question maybe for the district. I understand our school finances will be in the red soon. Will there be additional levies required for operating expenses?
I can address that. I don't know what soon constitutes to different people, but on the 5-year forecast, basically it goes out for 5 years. And at the end of those 5 years, we're projected to be in the deficit. And I want to stress that that is not uncommon in school districts in the state of Ohio. And things can change in 5 years. And I'd like to, just stress that basically the 5-year forecast is a working document. It's, how do I want to say it? It's not a model, but it's a plan. It's a working plan. It's a living document. So it constantly changes. The closer you get to those outlying years, the better you're able to project. So we're doing everything that we can to conserve dollars in the operating money so we can make that last as long as possible. Terry, do you have anything to add?
I just want everyone to know it's probably not easy to see, on the outside, but we are running as fast as we can to be good stewards of the district's money. So I'm going to go back to the ESSER money, or as Amy said, the American Recovery Act money. We're trying to say, what are all of the new things we have to do, because there's a considerable amount, but also how do we use some of this money to really kind of fund some things that we normally do so that we can conserve, to whatever degree we can, funding. I concur with what Tammy said. This is natural with a 5-year forecast. And at some point we will have to talk about the renewal of our operating levies, because that's the way Ohio schools are funded, which is, believe me, more than an hour and a half community forum in the future about that. But we are working hard to caretake district funding.
All right. Shay, anything else in the chat before we go on?
Yeah, while we're on the master plan options, I want to bring up one thing that the group may want to consider, or the community advisory team want to consider, I believe. Carol there's so much love in the village for the spaceship music room. Might it be turned into an exhibition space or given another school-related or community purpose? Just put that on the radar for the team to consider and look into. I think that's good to have before the community advisory team for consideration. All right, let's continue on. I'm still documenting all of our questions, and we'll try, like I said before, about trying to answer all the questions that we can today. And if we don't get to all of them in this chat, we will post them on the YS Forward site. So Jeff, go ahead. Let's keep moving forward regarding the master plan options.
So I'm going to launch a poll to ask kind of get your feedback. The first one is just kind of a demographic question: who's in the room? So if you would this is multiple choice, so choose all that apply for yourself. All right, just a couple more seconds. We'll let a few more votes get in here.
I'm not seeing a poll.
Let's see.
If you're not having it come up across the bottom of the screen, if you're logged in, if you are on your phone, there should be little buttons at the bottom of the screen. One says polling. It's next to participants and chat. You may be able to tap there on your iPhone app. On the web-based browser, it should have come up automatically for everyone. And if you are dialing into the phone number, that is not coming up.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it. I see chat. I see meeting settings. I don't see a poll.
Yeah.
I don't see experiencing polling issues?
I don't see it. I don't see it. I mean, I saw the demographic poll, but so if that's what we have, then we're good.
Yeah, it's just the demographic right now. The reason we're collecting this is we just want to know who is responding to the questions. And it is anonymous. We just trying to gauge, how populations feel about things. All right. So with that being said, I think I'll go ahead and end the poll and we can share this with you. Hopefully you can see the polling results here. %, students, 54% parents, 81% residents, 54% parents. A handful of students are with us, some local business owners, local official, and some Yellow Springs employees. Okay, so that's who's with us tonight. And the next question is regarding the master plan options, okay? And there are 4 questions in this poll, so if you'll just kind of scroll down your screen, you should see the options here. I'm sorry, there are actually 5 questions in this poll. I misspoke.
One question I could quickly cover from the chat here as everyone's doing the polling exercise. A question was asked if the current administration offices are planned to move to a new building. That has not been a part of the community advisory team discussion to this point. It's not been a cost that's been added into this at any stage.
One thing I will share is when a district does a single K-12 building with OFCC, if your administration offices fit within that co-funded square footage, it is allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Got it.
There's a question from MB about educational reprogramming and what that means. We spoke early in the presentation about the educational visioning efforts and how the space might better respond to support teaching and learning at Yellow Springs. So those that educational reprogramming is that sort of modification. So that can be done with either the K-12 or the demo reno add solution, but the renovation options do not include educational reprogramming.
The state used the term reprogramming. I would traditionally use the term remodeling, okay, versus renovation or something else. But you're moving walls, you're making the space configured differently.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Young, I see Tom Young is following the district YouTube page to gather comments there. And he is, for those that aren't able to participate in the Zoom meeting, there are some responding. We'll make sure we get those added into to any results. So thank you to Ms. Diamond for participating on the YouTube page comments, and we will make sure that that gets factored in. And thanks, Mr. Young, for including that. There's a question from Mr. Buckley. It says, from Carol Young, how will these poll results be used? It's not representative of the population of Yellow Springs. Correct, we understand that. This is going to be taken to a more formal poll by Paul Fallon and Associates that we talked about in our second forum. And there will be a formally scientifically tested methods survey that is going to begin, I believe, next week. Is that correct? So yes, we understand from Mr. Buckley or Ms. Young that that this is not a fully representative group of Yellow Springs population. Thank you.
Yeah, by knowing who's here and who's responding to the poll, it helps us kind of take things with a grain of salt, so to speak. If there were 60 students here tonight, it would say one thing, right? And so we want to be mindful of who's responding. That's the intent. All right, so I'm going to end the poll. It looks like everyone is in here. And we're going to take a moment to share the results. So hopefully you can see these. Let's see, renovate all, the expensive option, the 39.2 million was strongly opposed by this group, ranging all the way down to strongly supported at 4%.
Jeff, I'd just like to remind you that for those that are watching on YouTube, would you mind reading those results just so everyone's able to see them? Because only those on the desktop are able to see that.
Oh, so, okay. Thank you, Shay. Yeah, so they strongly opposed for the renovate all option, high and medium priority was strongly opposed by 48% of the group, opposed by 27% of the group. 16% were neutral, 5% supported it, and 4% strongly supported it. The next option, renovate only high priority items at 22.3 million. Strongly opposed by 46%, opposed by 21%. 16% were neutral, 14% supported it, and 2% strongly supported it. All right, the next one, renovate just the minimums. This is, again, is a warm, cool, safe, and dry scenario at $12.1 million. Strongly opposed by 50% of respondents tonight, opposed by 18%, 11% were neutral, 9% supported it, and 13% strongly supported this option. Option 4, the new K-12 at Enon Road, 25.9 million local cost after the state reimbursement. Strongly opposed by 16%, opposed by 5%, 13% were neutral, 16% supported it, and 50% strongly support this option. And the last option, option 5, the demo reno ad scenario, it was strongly opposed by 27%, opposed by 20%, neutral were 20%. It was supported by 29%, and it was strongly supported by 5% of tonight's audience. Okay. Make sure I capture this.
I want to jump back and go back to a question, not specific to the polling results, I guess, but Chris Hamilton said, I thought the discussion earlier from the kids' perspective did not address my question. Has there been discussion about what the kids and community lose by moving all the kids to the Enon campus? Our kids love being downtown, and so did we.
I'll take that. I mean, there's not been that direct discussion. I think, you know, again, depending upon how this falls out, it may not be a discussion, but I think there's certainly some loss there, but also some corresponding gain. So, but Chris, we did not really discuss it in that manner. I will say that, you know, the village is not quite that big, so that we do have things in relatively close proximity.
There was a lot of conversation about, not a lot, but there was conversation about would the Mills Lawn campus support a K-12? It would be doable, but it would change the nature of that site. It would consume the entire site. You'd have traffic, you know, with students and more bus traffic to the building, to and from the building. And it just seemed to be an untenable thing for both the district and for the community to do that on the Mills Lawn parcel. Okay. All right. So the next option, and let's see. Let me do it this way.
Jeff, I'd just like to quickly remind everyone that we're going to try to be as respectful of the 7:30 timeline that we set out as possible. Mm-hmm. So we're going to give some options here. You know, just want to put that 7:30 timeline in everyone's front of mind. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Shay. And I have 7:17 current right now. So we've discussed a couple of funding options tonight, and we just kind of want to gauge the group's tolerance of either of these. The first one is funding the whole project based on a property tax. And these values that are articulated here are based on the maximum cost of $35 million. That is the new K-12 option, but it's the maximum that the district would have to spend, that the district would have to raise. So that was our most conservative way to illustrate this. The first option, again, is all property tax driven. It equates to $30 a month in additional taxes for each $100,000 of property value, okay? The second option, to what degree would you support a 37-year bond based on a combined property tax of $20 each month and an income tax of 0.5%? That would cost about $4 a month for every $10,000 of annual income. So that's a little wordy. I'll let you take your time and kind of read through that. But for every $10,000 of income, there would be $4 of tax, okay? Do those make sense to people? I mean, you may or may not agree with them. That's fine, but I just want to be sure that that we're explaining these scenarios as clearly as we can. Shay, are we seeing anything on the chat?
No, I'm keeping up with it, but I want to give everyone the time and focus here to understand this before we go to polling.
Yep. All right. Well, with that being said, let's go ahead and we will launch this last poll, or this poll. Again, there are two options that you'll see. You'll read the first one and scroll down to the second one, and just gauge your level of support for the two solutions.
There's a question. Actually, I don't want to skew the polling. I'll ask this after you close the poll, Jeff.
Okay.
I would rather it be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid that might skew the answer. But I'd like to ask a question from the chat when we do close the poll.
Very good.
Josephine, one of our high school students, says, I don't think I'm able to understand these options because I don't pay taxes. Is it okay if I don't respond? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say, you will soon.
All right, so our response rate is tailing off a little bit here. Shay, I have 44 responses so far.
That looks right, given the number of people that are on dialing in by phone or those that are not responding. Like I know Dr. Holden's not answering in some of the polling, some others from the district are not. So that looks right to me. We have 66 total in the meeting. Okay. So given phone numbers and others, that looks like a good number.
Got a few latecomers trickling in here. I just don't want to cut anyone off. I'll give you another 10 seconds.
I want to answer a quick question there from Gary Z. Can a local property tax be issued in stages? No, it would have to be uniform across all property.
All right.
And then I want to go back and ask the question that Dorothy brings up. She said, as long as everyone's done with polling, if that's okay.
Yep, I've closed the poll.
Okay. And Sean has asked if we could stop the screen share for a quick second while we have the discussion on this part. Mm-hmm. Dorothy asked, am I right in assuming option 2 would be easier on the people on fixed income who own their own house? Option 2 is the combined, the combined property tax and income tax.
The challenge is everyone sort of has to do their own calculation on this.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to say.
Okay. Very good.
I would throw out on the comment there, Shay, on stages, you can't do some and not others, but you can have steps in bond issue repayments, which is more complex, but is possible.
Great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Option 1, again, this was the all property tax funded option over 37 years. It was strongly opposed by 15%, opposed by 21%. 27% of the audience were neutral, 25% supported it, and 13% strongly supported it. So again, that is option number 1, all property tax. Option 2 was strongly opposed by 19%. It was opposed by 8%. 15% were neutral. 27% supported it, and 31% of respondents tonight strongly support scenario 2. Okay. All right, very good. We appreciate your input tonight on those. Shay, keep me abreast of the chat. We have one more piece of information we want to get to. So I'm going to keep moving, okay?
Please, let's get to the community advisory team's last update here. And then anything that's not answered, we will share on ysforward.com with their written response.
Yeah. So at Forum 2, we identified, I think there were 8 scenarios of what we call LFIs, which are locally funded initiatives. That's state speak for things that the district has to pay for all by themselves. We identified those as those additional facility options as being auditoriums, gyms, geothermal heating and cooling, renewable energy systems, net zero energy consumption. Those top 5 were the top highly rated or highly valued of the options. The other was additional education space for added capacity and flexibility, tennis courts at Enon Road, and then baseball and softball fields at Enon Road. Okay, so we've dug into kind of those top 5 a little bit to help put some dollars behind them. And the first one was the auditorium. We're showing Auditorium A and Auditorium B. They both have 400 seats. You'll see the Auditorium A does not have a fly loft. A fly loft is the area that sits directly above the stage that allows set pieces and scenery to be raised and lowered in and out of view. So many of your probably most collegiate auditoriums would have that capability. Many high school auditoriums have that capability. The orchestra pit is just that. It would be a recessed area for the orchestra to play from. And that option is $2.2 million. Auditorium B is with the fly loft, with the orchestra pit, and you can see the cost difference there, $2.8 million. Another option was for an additional gym, and there's a range of solutions here. There's kind of a large auxiliary gym space. It would give you an 84-foot court, which is high school regulation size, about 200 seats, and that comes in at $3 million. A smaller, about half the size of that version, would be 3,500 square feet, an elementary size gym, no seating, just phys ed space at $1.5 million. And finally, these were more sustainability driven. The first one being geothermal heating and cooling in the building of $1.3 million upfront cost. And then to go to net zero, so we're not consuming, any energy essentially from the grid. It would take the investment of the geothermal plus 1.9 million for a total of $3.2 million to get to net zero. And that difference would be made up primarily with a solar photovoltaic array. Okay. So any questions on those, Shay, before we launch into the poll?
No LFI discussion, all other.
All right, then with that being said, I'm just gonna ask you all, I'm gonna launch a poll here and ask you to gauge the appropriateness of these scenarios.
I'm a little confused on this. These are things that would be paid for through taxation and not through a capital campaign?
These are things that have to be paid for somehow.
Mhm.
So we're just asking what your level of interest is in that personally and however it would be paid for. That answer your question, Amy?
Not adequately, no. Sorry. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, we just want to know
These are options above.
what's being asked of the community. And there's ways, I mean, these are the type of things that were paid for through both public funding and through private funding, you know, back in the 1960s when, you know, the library, for instance, was paid for by both, well, they raised money for it and it's maintained right now through tax dollars, right? But so the question is there a capital campaign? Is there grant funding that's being pursued for any of this? What are the options?
Right now, we're just asking for the community's level of interest in these things, and then searching for ways to fund them would be the next step, if that's fair. I mean, right now, we don't know if it's important to the community to consider further any of these options.
Well, I think it's difficult for us to say, yes, we're interested in those things when they're considered nice to haves without knowing a little more about who would be asked to pay for it.
Right now, assume the taxpayers would be asked to pay for these. If it's important enough for you to pay for it, then it's highly important. Does that make sense?
There's a question about the geothermal expenses. Have we done calculations to see if expenditure for geothermal would save money over its operating life?
What I would throw out is right now, because of the low price of natural gas, geothermal doesn't have a quick payback. But if it's important to you to not add to the carbon footprint, that would factor into your consideration of the importance of it to you. And by going all electric is the only way that you can achieve net zero also. So it ties together in your value systems if it's important to you.
But we'd also need to kind of know return on investment. We don't know if these are good long-term investments.
Right. Right now, I would share that these likely don't have payback for you versus the initial investment based upon the low cost of natural gas right now. That could change in 10 years. If carbon tax went on the natural gas, geothermal may become more cost effective again in a shorter payback, like around 10 years, like it was, 10 years ago. But sorry, no easy.
Well, but there's also maintenance costs. So geothermal is supposed to be one of the, we're just starting to get the numbers about the long-term maintenance of geothermal, right? So is geothermal and again, the long-term maintenance of solar panels has improved, right? They weren't necessarily a great thing to invest in 20, 30 years ago in terms of long-term maintenance. But, it's so the question is like, what are it would be more important to have kind of like a cost trade-off. There are funding opportunities available for fixed seating auditoriums, I know, but the question is that, how seriously would we about pursuing those sort of things? And
yeah, I think, Amy, you're bringing up very good points. Sorry to interrupt you. You're bringing up very good points. And I think some of this is we don't know. And in order to have in-depth conversations about this, we really have to, because none of these are inexpensive. I mean, right? None of them. So we really have to have conversations about, of these options, in the ideal, we might want all of them, but of these options, which is important to us, if any, and if that's the case, Thank you, Kathy. I understand. If that's the case, what are we willing to pay for, right? And once we get there, then we can think about things. And I think you're right about a capital campaign or whatever. So we're just not quite there yet, but I'll talk to Todd and try to get kind of cost out figures if those numbers are even available. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Jeff, I'd like for you to.
We've been gently reminded
here.
about time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just to share the results, and we will adjourn as soon as we can. The auditorium seats, 9% opposed, strongly opposed, 12% opposed, 23% were neutral, 28% supported, and 28% strongly supported.
Jeff, I want to add that I got a message from Sean that the polling results are on screen for the stream.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So I don't need to read them all. You can see for the auxiliary gym, 30% strongly supported that. That was the greatest response group. For geothermal heating and cooling, 37% supported that. And for the net zero solution, 35% supported that. Okay. So those are the polling results. That is all we have for you tonight. I know we've gone over and we apologize. We appreciate your time tonight. Shay, a little bit about next steps for us.
Yeah. Oh, I just remuted myself. So next step is the formal methods tested survey and polling that is going to be done. There will be more details. Dr. Holden, if you'd like to share anything about that, but we understand some of your concerns from the chat. This may not be a fully representative group of the community. And the next step is to ensure that we do reach a fully representative cross-section of your community with this formal methods tested survey and polling effort. There's a company that will be leading that process called Paul Fallon and Associates. We talked about that a couple of times in the forums before, but that is our next step from here.
Thanks. I just want to thank everybody. Time is valuable, and I know that, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions that were not answered. I'll provide those to Dr. Holden. We'll get those posted onto the YS Forward website as soon as possible. Thanks.
Yeah, very good. Sir, can I just ask, please consider collecting narratives from the from villagers, because I think that would be helpful, especially since we're still kind of in the ideation mode.
Amy, you're talking about narratives from the chat, right?
No, I mean narratives during the surveys. Is that we've gone through a very complicated year, and I think that you'll probably get a better idea of what language people are using and basically what people's situation is at. There's a lot of people who are in a very different situation than they were 12 months ago. So even 6 months ago. So it would probably be helpful to understand, how things have changed over the last year, and collecting some narratives about that might be the fastest way of getting that type of information. A fixed question survey won't give you that type of information. The community has seen some disruption, and it would be good to characterize that disruption.
Thank you all.
Have a great day. I do this sort of thing for you.